Hello, this is Stuart Taylor. Welcome to lecture number 5, the principle of least privilege. The principle of least privilege is a very simple concept. It requires that a user, system, or application be given no more privilege than necessary to perform its function or job. This probably sounds like common sense. And in principle, it is. However, actually enforcing the principle of least privilege in complex environments is challenging. Why is it such a challenge? Well, imagine applying the principle of least privilege to a single user. You provide the user with access to the building. You ensure she has physical access to the appropriate offices, the common areas, etc. Next, she needs a login. She needs access to files and folders, applications, a printer, maybe the corporate intranet. Easy, right? No problem. Now multiply that by 1,000 users across 8 different geographic locations, each with multiple lines of business. Some of those people's need access to multiple locations. Others only need access to their own location. In this situation, we have multiple types of users with different requirements. Then you have to think about new hires, staff who've transferred to a different office or been promoted, and people who leave the organisation. And so far, we've only considered people. But the principle of least privilege doesn't just apply to people, it also applies to other systems and software. It is common for one system to access another system. For example, a database system may hold data for multiple applications. Ensuring that each system only gets access to the data it needs is also part of the principle of least privilege. You can see that the scale and complexity of the principle of least privilege can get very complex very quickly. Why is the principle of least privilege so important though? Why should we be concerned? Well, meet Jerome Kerviel. Jerome worked for Société Générale. Société Générale is the 3rd largest bank in France and the 8th largest in Europe. In January 2008, the bank lost approximately 4.9 billion euros. Yes, that's right, 4.9 billion euros. The bank states that these losses were down to fraudulent transactions carried out by Jerome Kerviel. Jerome was able to take unauthorized trading positions and then cover them up with fake transactions. And he was able to do this because he had access to systems that he should not have had access to. Jerome did not start life at the bank as a trader. He'd transferred from another department. Had the bank applied the principle of least privilege correctly, Jerome may not have had access to the systems that allowed him to hide his losses. So how can we apply the principle of least privilege? Well, details on this are out of the scope for this course and for this qualification. However, some high-level techniques include having good processes and procedures. Having proper processes and procedures for user account creation, handling situations where employees transfer from one part of the organisation to another, as was the case with Jerome Kerviel. Having processes and procedures for ongoing user account management, and how to handle leavers. Now there is much guidance for this online, and there are many software companies who provide tools to help you to manage your users. Now there are many different types of user account management solution. I can't list them all here, but they do make managing user accounts and their associated permissions much easier, and you may wish to consider evaluating and spending the money on one of these systems. Account standardization is another technique. This is where we standardize a limited number of user account types. Now, one of the ways to do this is to create templates and to use templates to create new accounts. And you should only deviate from these standard types if you really need to. Administrator accounts are another issue. You should limit the number of users that actually have administrator rights. And administrator accounts should have strict password controls enforced on them. You should also ensure that system administrators use a regular standard account for their day-to-day tasks. This would probably mean issuing them with 2 user accounts. A regular account which does not have administrative rights for their daily tasks, and an administrator account which does have administrator rights, but that account should only be used when it's actually needed. And groups, finally. Using groups is a good way to manage users. You can apply permissions and rights to groups, and in fact they should be applied to groups rather than user accounts. If you get into a situation where you're applying rights and permissions to individual user accounts, you can quickly lose track of who has what. The effective use of groups can reduce the risk of rogue users. In summary, this lecture has covered the principle of least privilege, why the principle of least privilege is important, and some high-level techniques to assist with applying the principle of least privilege. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.